you know, as in everybody's mind now, it's the PNC building, but we're changing the name of the building to Preston Centre, and it's the English spelling of center, C-E-N-T-R-E. In Preston, actually, both ties back to the Wolfe family and Harry Preston Wolfe, who was actually the impetus for the construction and the planning of the building. But in addition to that, in Old English, at least one version of the definition of Preston is a town with a church in it, so priest town. And so we thought that was kind of clever because we built a mixed-use building here, which has both residential, office, and retail, and it's right next to the church. So it's kind of a modern-day interpretation, a vertical interpretation of Preston. So there's a sunken residential amenity space here out in front. Again, there was a two-story atrium that was very, dated the building very much, and it made for a miserable kind of pedestrian experience along Broad Street. It was, other than a few street trees, it went right straight to the 16-foot from the curb property line of the building. It was probably 35 feet tall. It was reflective glass, and it went the entire length of the block. And so it again was a dead block in downtown. And so it had a full basement, and we knew we were going to tear off the upper floors, but you had two choices. Either one, you would fill in the basement, or two, you could do what we did, which was to recapture it. It was structurally very interesting and difficult. You had to buttress kind of the walls, because when you tear the structure out of there, you lose the beams that keep the basement walls from falling in. And so that's why it has the terrace planters. But it was a little bit of thinking about the Apple store in New York that's there on Central Park, how that's all subterranean. If we were in New York, we probably would have tried to rent the basement. Here, not a chance. So we created kind of this now walk down space off of Broad Street, which we hopefully have another restaurant in it. But that was really the genesis for it, and also to create more green space for the residents. We already had the existing elevated walkway that was fully enclosed. It was, quite frankly, hotter in the summer and colder in the winter than it was outside. It didn't particularly smell very good. So we had at one point in time considered just getting some ventilation in there in a big way, which meant really taking out windows. But it was still, at the end of the day, going to be a 1970s, tunnel, elevated walkway tunnel. So we were going to spend a lot of money in order to make it really nice and fitting for the building. And at one point I just decided, well, if we're going to spend a couple $1 million probably making this what it needs to be in terms of getting from the big garage in point A to point B, and my daughter happens to live in New York right on the High Line. And every time I go to see her, I look out that's all I do is stand at the window and look at the High Line. And I kind of decided, well, why don't we just tear the roof off altogether and the sides off and make it a great, nice green space, both for the residents and a pleasant walk from this major garage. You can study the footprints of these buildings, right? And when we build a new construction residential building, it has a 66-foot depth, which basically has either a 5 or 6 foot corridor in the middle of the building, and then roughly a 30-foot unit on each side. And a lot of your office buildings in downtown, any downtowns, but let's say especially newer ones in Columbus, they have a much broader, deeper footprint, which really makes for not as much glass as you'd like to have in a residential building if you were to convert them. And so we kind of searched around the city at buildings that had something like this 66-foot depth, and that's what this building has. So it was the right building to try it on.